Can be hard when you grow up. People fill you with doubt. You start thinking about what you're gonna do now. And it's do or die, gotta make it count. So lose your worries, let your problems go on until my whole body burns out. I ain't never gonna slow down. I ain't never gonna slow down.
Welcome everyone, this is Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden and I will be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about life coaching, how to look at your life, personal and professional development, self-improvement. Today is going to be that conversation. Today we're going to be having the aspect of wisdom play the centerpiece for what we're going to be showing you and previewing what the mind can do and what the mind can accomplish. Because when we're trying to figure out our life, we might have different avenues that we can go down. Think of it as a flow chart. You are at one point right now, let's call it here. On this flow chart, you might have multiple moves that you can make. I always like to just limit it to 3 moves. You can go this way, you can go that way, you can go this way. When you choose that move, right, you always can go back and do the other thing. However, now you're on a different path. So now that path is going to lead you to maybe 3 or 5 or 10 different options that you can do. This is life. This is going to be the game that we are playing. There's always a move. There's always something that we need to do. Our attention, our focus, our drive, our purpose. The end goal for what many people want is happiness. But yet they are on this path that is leading to all of these places that they think happiness is, but they don't have the roadmap. They don't have the diagram. They don't have the cheat code or the walkthrough. This right here is the aspect of life. No one necessarily knows what's going to make them happy, what's going to make them fulfilled. We can definitely try, but then sometimes when we try to do the things that we think are going to be the right things, we find that maybe they're not the right things. So in life, we might try things to see if they're a good fit. We might do things and we get stuck in them. And depending on your situation, you might fall in between one of those. But maybe you're just a nomad. Maybe you're a free soul. Maybe you're a person who sees no bounds, sees no walls, sees no obstacles. There's no cage stopping you from taking flight. But for the people who are curious about the paths that they're on, the paths that they're walking, they're concerned about their destination. Is it truly the destination that they need to be in or to be at? Then this episode is going to be for you, because today we're going to be talking with a guest, Greg Davis. He is going to be helping us understand his journey in life, how he helps people, the book that he has written to help people find that joy and happiness and become the people that they were always destined to be. So let's get into that interview with Greg Davis and myself. Welcome, Greg Davis, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks for having me today.
Of course. Today I have you on as a life coach, as a author, and a writer. We're going to be talking about your work. We're going to be talking about your book and how you help the world. In your own words, tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help.
Yeah, sure. I'm Greg Davis. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm a retired financial executive and also professor at University of Illinois. And now I've devoted my life to writing a book called Checkmate. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, today with Michael, and trying to share those life lessons with as many people as possible. And that's what I'm looking forward to sharing with your audience today.
Writing a book is always a passion of love, because we pour our hearts and we pour our souls into the book, and we are giving all this information we want the world to read, to know, to understand, the wisdom of our years. Yet sometimes not everyone is going to readily read the book or, want to read the book, because we have a short attention span. We have so many other books. I mean, I have hundreds of books on my wish list, on my to-do list, on my cabinets and my shelves, my bookshelves. There's just so much knowledge. And one of the things I love to ask authors is, why write a book?
Yeah, it's a great question, Michael. For me, it was a passion of mine when I retired in 2021. One of my bucket list items was to write a book to help others, right? I was 62 at the time, so I had 6 decades of experience behind me. And as you pointed out, I tried to take that experience and share that it's a really easy to read 150-page book that talks a lot about life lessons and lots of topics. And I think, you say we all have our to-do list of books we want to read. This one's a pretty easy one to pick up and knock out in 3 or 4 hours. And you pick up a lot of information in those 3 to 4 hours.
No, that's important because if a book can be quick to read, people are going to read it more readily. If you have like a Harry Potter book, that right there is good. You have a whole series that could be more difficult and challenging for a person, especially when it comes to personal development, self-improvement, making their life better, because many people, they just kind of go through with the ebb and flow of life. In your experience, I'm sure you have maybe dealt with that. Maybe you have seen people deal with that. They just kind of move through life with maybe no purpose, no passion, no drive for a better tomorrow. What would be your advice to those people to say, hey, let me switch it up, let me pivot, let me change the mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a challenge for a lot of us because we kind of get in our day-to-day ruts, Michael. We just kind of go to work every day, whether it's work from home or going into an office, as I did for better part of probably 30 years, going to different offices, particularly at Hershey. And I love my work at Hershey, but quite honestly, I got to a point where I got burnt out. And I think we all face that at some point in our lives, in our jobs, in our careers. And the toughest part is to come off of that rebound and say, okay, what am I going to do about it? Right. And for me, even though I was age 54, I decided to take a completely different approach to my career when I went into academia and trying to teach at the University of Illinois. So after 33 years in a corporate office environment, I went completely outside my comfort zone, which is hard for any of us to do, and went into teaching. And it was a big move. My wife and I moved 700 miles away, uprooted from our friends and family, moved to the beautiful college town of Champaign, Illinois, and absolutely had the 7 best years of our lives there before I fully retired in 2021. So I think the message to your audience is pick yourself up. I know days are tough when you get in that, as I was at Hershey, just kind of in the day to day, and you kind of think you're in a rut and you can't get out of it. The real key is to jump off that treadmill, right, and jump onto something new and make that leap of faith into something you really want to do. And for me, teaching, I had done it as a part-time adjunct professor for years. And those were my favorite days of my work week. It's the days I was teaching in the evening, even though it meant for long days. So I guess my advice is for your audience, find what they're passionate about. For me, it was teaching and helping others understand key concepts of finance and accounting. As boring as that may sound, that was really a passion for me. And when I got to do it in the classroom, it really made my days go much quicker. And I was really looking forward to every day of my work as opposed to where I was in my prior lifestyle.
We have a very similar mindset and almost a very similar path in the sense of what we are passionate about. For me, I was a teacher for several years. I was corporate before I was a teacher, and I loved my years of teaching. The only reason I left teaching was because of the institution of teaching, not so much of the kids and helping them and learning. There's an aspect of teaching that is really good, right? Education, wisdom, knowledge, instilling that, guiding the next generation, right? Love that aspect of teaching, right? I wouldn't give that up. But the handcuffs that you get, the things that you can do, that's more restrictive, right? So we have the curriculum K to 12. In college is a little bit different. You have your syllabus, you have your course curriculum. And when you are presenting it, your class to the dean or whoever you have to present it to in your local college, you basically have to say, this is what the class is going to be teaching. Yet there's not much free reign, but there is more free reign in college than it is in elementary. Kids are just inundated with so many tests K to 12. I mean, there's always a new test every single year. It's like, this year is a STAR test. This year is the I test. This year is this, the reading test. And it's just like, whoa, like we need less tests. We need more teachers doing what they love to teach. And that was something that I just couldn't get my mind over. It's just like we're giving these kids tests that they don't want to do, that they're suffering through, and they're literally just kind of picking whatever because they don't want to do it. And the scores that they get, you know what they do? Basically, they get the score, and now their motivation is low, their self-identity is skewed because they have this bad score. And we have these grades that we give these children, and we say, you're an A student. You're a B student, you're an F student, you're a failure. What does that do to the mind? What does that do to the culture? What does that do to the future generations? Well, we can see that right now. I'm sure you can see what is the issue. And the work that you do is starting to help people see what they can do, go after their passions that they might have lost. It's so important that we start to look at that and how to fix it. I want to talk about society. Society has a lot of issues, as I was saying, kind of giving that preface: burnout, loss of passion, going into dead end jobs, finding places that they don't necessarily like, but they stay there too long. Think of like a tree that's just rooted down and they don't want to move. What would be the fix for helping people make the changes in your life, similar to how you made those changes, just uprooting yourself 700 miles away, starting fresh, leaving your friends, leaving your family, and saying, I'm going to do this because I love this?
Yeah, I will just say, first of all, that wasn't easy. And it took a support group, particularly my wife, who was incredibly supportive of my effort to go into education. And to her credit, she was willing to take that jump of faith, as you just mentioned, to uproot. She was a physician, quite honestly, at a local hospital in Pennsylvania. And so she left a job she really enjoyed. Now, the stress was very high in her work as well. She left a job she really enjoyed to join me in that venture. And I think it's hard, thinking of your listeners hearing this conversation, they're probably thinking, well, it's so much easier said than done that somebody just moved their profession and moved 700 miles away. It wasn't something we hadn't planned, right? I mean, we had talked about this for a couple of years, and we kind of had our finances in order that we could take that leap of faith, because for her to leave a physician's job and me to leave an executive job at Hershey, we left a pretty good salary on the table. But it was for a better cause, because we really wanted to both be doing things that would help other people. For me, that was teaching, and for her, that was doing volunteer work. I think the hard thing, Michael, for your audience to understand is you just have to kind of to sit down with your spouse or your better half and figure out a game plan of, look, we're not happy in the roles we're in now. We need to do something about it. And let's write down the 5 things that have to happen. And part of that is making sure you have some savings from a finance standpoint set aside. You can take that risk of faith. I did have a job when I went there, but still we were finding new living arrangements. We were making new friends. We were getting acquainted to a new area in South Central Illinois. And it was a major change of life. And it wasn't easy, but I don't regret it at all. And I think my wife would say the same thing. We made a great number of friends out in that area. And the fact that we were now living a life that helped other people was so much more rewarding. I talk about this in the book. One of my comments is, don't ever take a job just for the paycheck, because there's so much more to it. Should be so much more to a job than just the money. And that's what teaching and for her volunteering became, is the fact that you could help other people is much more rewarding. You got to take those steps, make that leap of faith, but do it with a plan in place. Just don't do it haphazardly.
When I left teaching, I moved to Texas. I was in Connecticut, so right next door to PA. And been to Hershey Park a couple times. Good place, right? Fun, enjoyable. Probably bring my kids there. And what I will say is that New England, they have a very different culture. It's a very different culture. People there are just different. And when I moved, I think it was like 2,100 miles away to Texas, Austin, Texas. The people were just different. I was just like, what is going on? These people are just weird. They're trying to talk to me. They're trying to do all these things. It was a new reality for me. And it's scary because you're basically putting yourself in a situation that you're not familiar with.
Not comfortable.
Exactly. And a lot of people love comfort, where they're like, okay, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to move my pawns. I'm going to move my knights back and forth so I don't make any mistake.
I love the chess analogies, by the way.
Exactly, because we're going to be talking about your book, Checkmate. Why is the book called Checkmate? Is it because we're setting ourselves up for that win in our life, or is it something that we have to look at where it's just like, if we don't want to lose, we have to make moves and be the attackers in life rather than just the passive goers?
Yeah, it's a great question, Michael. I think, the challenge for me in the title was I had always loved the game of chess. I played in high school during the Bobby Fischer era, which is probably beyond some of the younger audiences' knowledge base, but that's what the craze took over America back in the 70s. And then I kind of took a 45-year hiatus as I came out, went to college, and then worked. So it wasn't until I retired that I started picking up chess again. So when I wrote the book, I wanted to have some sort of chess analogy. And for me, the checkmate meant a bunch of different things. I do have chess analogies in each chapter of the 12 chapters of the book. And quite honestly, one of my favorite stories in the book with a huge lesson about teamwork is my high school chess championship story, which I won't give away, but didn't end as well as we would all like. But I learned a tremendous lesson from that. I think the title for me, Checkmate, is I really want the subtitle is tips and lessons to help you make the right moves to achieve happiness. So Checkmate for me is really pulling all these different moves you have to do in a chess game, just like you do in the game of life, to actually hit that ultimate finalization of hitting that checkmate in your life. What drives you to that ultimate level of happiness? As I've said before, for my wife and I, it's helping other people. And that's easy to say and sometimes not always easy to put forth in words, but that's what the checkmate was for our lives, is helping other people. And we've done that tremendously since we've taken that leap of faith back in 2014 to move to a different area and do different things with our lives.
This is good information to have because people, especially in marriage, they tend to go different paths. For example, you wanted to do this, maybe your wife wanted to stay being a doctor because she put in all that work, and there's a lot to navigate. But one of the things that I think people don't necessarily know, or but I think I can kind of tell that you said you did it for a couple of years. It took a couple of years for you to plan. You communicated, right? Communication. And communication is one of those things that many relationships lack today. Most people, they just kind of passively say, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. They might do something like a date night once a year, Valentine's Day, something like that. We save our love only for exclusive holidays. And this is happiness, right? Because we get into the aspect of happiness now. As we say, we can make the right moves of life, but if you're doing all the wrong things, you're going to lose. So if you're not having good communication, if you're not planning for your future, for retirement, things along those lines, right? It's just the fundamental basics of how to live life. Yet many people just haphazardly go YOLO. YOLO means you only live once. And that's the new moniker for our new generations, our Generation Zs and Alphas. They basically come out saying we want to be different than the older generations. I want to talk about how the generations are shifting, right? Because our older generations, they have a very analytical mindset, like a chess match. We look at our moves versus now it's just like we play checkers and we just move it like, okay, boom. It's just like,
Very haphazardly.
yeah, now we're playing a game of chess and checkers. Some people who are thinking more into their future, more into their life, they treat it more like chess versus the people that are just kind of saying, okay, well, I'll do this, and there's no necessarily path for them. That's the game of checkers. And what happens is many people, they find themselves stressed, more anxious, unhappy, and unfulfilled. This is where older generation is coming in and saying, hey, check out this book, check out this. This is what I did. A little bit of wisdom. Yet we see them playing checkers and we don't necessarily say you're doing the wrong thing. It's just kind of like this is a different life, different time, a different mindset. What is your take on how our brains and our mindsets are shifting and evolving? Is it something that we should be worried about? Is it something we should be giving more attention to? Or is it something that we have to nip in the butt and fix it very quickly?
Yeah, that's a really challenging question, Mike. I love the thought process here. I think COVID was a major change to the way we culturally interact with each other, right? I mean, we used to be so much going into an office, interacting with people on a face-to-face basis. Likewise for me in the classroom. I love going into a classroom, interacting with students face-to-face, seeing the reactions to the material we were discussing. But COVID changed all that, right? And I think that's a major play as to how now we interact with one another. We're much more comfortable in Zoom settings as we have here today, and we're much more comfortable just working from home, quite honestly. And so I think the mindset of people have really changed dramatically since 2020. Here we are 4 years later, which is hard to believe. And we're still trying to figure out what is our best way to communicate with one another. You mentioned this earlier in your prior discussion about communication with people around you, particularly your spouse and other family members. I'll just point out that one of the things in the book that I talk about, it's kind of an interesting topic and it's kind of a little bit of an oddball one, is something called money dates. You mentioned dates and we go with our spouse during February 14th and Valentine's Day and so forth. Well, something that my wife and I have done for a number of years is what we do as called monthly money dates. And I've seen this in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere, but this is something I have in the book where I encourage people to go take their wife to a restaurant, have a nice bottle of wine. I mean, it's a little bit of a splurge night, right, for all of us, including myself. That money date is designed around a couple of things. I want it to be fun. I want it to be something to look forward to. But then anything's on the table. It doesn't have to be just finances. Like I've had some couples who have reached out to me since they've read my book, Checkmate, and they've come back and said, you know what? My wife was considering a major change in her career from teaching, actually, just like you, and moving into a completely different business aspect. And that's something they talked about at one of their money dates. And that was a great opportunity for them to sit down in a calm, relaxing environment and talk about a very difficult topic, right? Career changes. I think the money date's kind of a fun thing to kind of maybe have your listeners try out at some point. You can do it at home, have a nice meal, make sure you have a bottle of wine, but it's more fun if you go outside of your environment and do that in a casual eatery, one of your favorites. Have some fun with it, but then talk about where do you want to be in 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And maybe that involves amping up your savings a little bit. And I talk about some great savings concepts in the books. To your point here in this question, how we interact with each other is really challenging. And I think that has changed over the different generations. But I kind of feel a little bit of a sadness for the current generation, the younger generation, because they've come up through these last 4 years of COVID, where quite honestly, it's almost like we've been led to believe it's better to not interact face to face with people, right? Do things remotely, work from home remotely. I just don't think that's good for us from an overall concept of what we want to be as interacting with other human beings. It concerns me, quite honestly, Michael. I think we as an older generation, me in my 60s, we were very lucky how we grew up. And I think we were taught to interact very heavily with other people. It's always been a key for me is I love the face-to-face interactions I get a chance to do with people, whether it was in my career at Hershey or in my teachings at Illinois. It's a concerning topic for me. It's something we all have to grapple with on how we interact with others.
And we do have to look at the fix though, because there is always going to be a solution. There's always going to be a move that we can make. The game of chess, for example, right? We're just going to use the analogy for chess this whole episode is if you lose, you made a mistake. It's not that the other person was better. If you lose, you made a mistake somewhere, right? You moved the piece to where you shouldn't have. There's always a counterattack. There's always a solution. Yet many people, they don't look for the solutions anymore. We have COVID 2019, 2021. It's just a hard moment, right? Zoom was a small company, not really big. They had free, yeah, no one really knew about it. Now it's worth what, millions or billions of dollars because it was something that looked for the solution, right? Oh, kids can't go to school. Well, let's make classrooms for the kids online. And that was how we changed. And it happened so quickly because Zoom was one of those things where people were like, yeah, that would be cool, but we have Skype already and we have all these other things. But it wasn't until we needed that necessity where things changed. And I always say people rise to the challenge most of the time. Let's say 80% of the time. People are going to rise to the challenge. When you move, it's a great hack of life, right? If you stay in your hometown your whole life, it's a little bit more difficult because it's your comfort zone. You got your family, you got your friends, you know all the roads, you know all your stores, you know all the great spots.
It's a routine.
Yeah, it's a routine, right? But when you uplift yourself, you uproot yourself, you put yourself different, someplace new, you have no choice but to survive. And there's a difference in the mindset of survival and just kind of living versus what we are doing or what we can be doing. And basically, what that means is we didn't want COVID. No one says, hey, you know what? I want a pandemic this year. This could be great. Like a pandemic is going to make everyone's lives better. It's going to uproot everyone's habits. But that did the opposite. A lot of people, they suffered, right? Fear, anxiety, stress, uncertainty. I mean, we can go down the list of negative emotions, right? There's a saying, the COVID-15, people gained 15 pounds because they were just in their house for 3 months, eating, not doing anything. The gyms were closed. People didn't want to move because they were so afraid. What do you say to people who are afraid to take a jump of faith, a leap of faith, to do something different in life, to challenge the status quo? How could those people step into bravery instead of fear?
Yeah, I think, Michael, it's a lot like a game of chess, as you talk about, as far as the analogy. I was just playing in a tournament last weekend, and I was playing a senior in high school, young girl. To your point, I had a game plan in mind, right? But I messed up. Just like life, I made mistakes. And I realized that it was a 57 move game. So it was a rather lengthy game. But she beat me. And as I came back home and I played through the game and a couple times through, I realized, what was I thinking? We all make mistakes in life, and that's okay. But I think the key was what I'm trying to do now as I've become a little bit more resonating that we all make mistakes, we got to learn from them. And I talk about that in the book a little bit, is that I came home and played through those games and realized I made 3 tactical errors. Just like it happens in life, when you make an error, that's all right. Dust yourself off, get back up, and figure out what did you do wrong. Okay, I'm not going to do that again, right? That's the message. But I think a lot of times what happens, and it happened to me in my career, is I was promoted to like accountant level as a manager up to a assistant to the CFO. And quite honestly, it was a role that I just did temporarily for like 18 months. And what I didn't realize is in that 18 months, I was the unhappiest I'd ever been in my entire life. And everybody thought, geez, I had this great title, this new promotion, and this new work effort, but I was extremely miserable. That's when I realized, that's when I started to plan with my wife that I need to do something different. And that's when I started to plan my exit strategy from Hershey and realizing my love for teaching was the ultimate place I knew I wanted to be. I think the message out there for your listeners is certainly you can read through Checkmate and get some great ideas of how I handled lots of adversity. And you talk about COVID, I'll just give you a quick example. From April of 2020 through January of 2021, which was only like 8, 9 months, I lost 3 really close family members, 2 brothers and a brother-in-law. None of them to COVID. That's the weird part, right? None of them to the actual disease itself. Anytime you go through that kind of horrific 9 months of losing 3 really close family members, you can be pretty depressed, right? And I think the key for me in 2021, I still had my wife. We were still out in Illinois. So we were in this new environment and our family was back here in Pennsylvania going through all these struggles. But again, I just had to pick myself up, come back, help out where I could with my family during those tough times. And then we planned and moved back to Pennsylvania in summer of that year. And that's when I took my final retirement from Illinois. But my point was lots of things happen there that are outside of my control, just like it does to all of your listeners, right? Things happen beyond my control. We get upset. We start yelling some expletives about what's happening to us. But the real key is recognizing you can't control a lot of that stuff that happens to each of us. The key for me is realizing what I can control. For example, in that chess game, I'm not going to make those 3 mistakes again the next time I play that similar type of game. I'll hopefully do better the next time in that type of a match with a young lady who's attacking me like that. I think it's just the key here to your question is find the things that you're doing today that aren't making you happy and do something about it. And that's the hard part, but do something about it. Make some strides towards doing something different and then find that checkmate or happiness in your life that you've been seeking, because that's the real key to life.
What's the difference between happiness and fulfillment? Because we have been juggling those 2 terms. And a lot of people, they say they want to be happy, right? Most people want and seek happiness, right? I want to be happy. This will make me happy. You don't make me happy. Happiness is typically what we go for first. Then we look at fulfillment later on when we have a career, when we finally get the things we thought would make us happy and we realize they don't make us happy. Now we're not fulfilled. What is the difference between happiness and fulfillment, and or which one should a person go after?
Yeah, I'll at least give you my opinion on this. There's a tough discernment, I think, between those 2 words. For me, happiness was finding something that truly made me want to go do it each day, right? And for me, that was teaching at the time. And now it's sharing the concepts from my book, Checkmate, with others so they can benefit from that. My wife's a great example. While she was in medicine for the majority of her career, now she basically 5 days a week goes across the street here in Philadelphia to a Broad Street ministry, and she helps homeless people every day of the week. And that's not the most rewarding job. It doesn't pay well, but that doesn't even matter, right? So for me, happiness for my wife and I is doing those things for others. That's the greatest joy of our lives. Now, fulfillment, I think, is a little bit different. Fulfillment for me is, did I do something that makes me feel better about where I'm at in my career? So fulfillment for me a lot means career-wise, what has happened. And so for me, fulfillment was doing the best I could do in my jobs at Hershey. And our mission at Hershey was pretty cool. And I talk about this in the book. Our mission at Hershey was to generate money for a local school called the Milton Hershey School, which was for children who didn't have both parents, right? Orphans, basically. For me, that mission is what drove me to fulfillment in my career at Hershey. I always wanted to get up each day and do something more to generate more revenue for the company, whether it was a new product line within Hershey at the park, maybe a new ride we were going to invest in a year or so, which could be a $10 million investment. That would generate some additional revenue and profits that we could give to the school to generate, classroom environment for those underprivileged children. For me, fulfillment is probably more career-wise. Happiness for me is, boy, when you wake up each day, are you excited about what you're about to do that day? That for me is happiness.
No, that's a great way to look at fulfillment and then happiness, because fulfillment is the career aspect, what you do in your day. Happiness is how do you feel during your day. Like if you don't feel like, okay, I want to go into work, like I dread this, most likely you're just in the wrong profession, the wrong career. You're going down the wrong path. It happened to me when I was working at Sikorsky, 18, 19 years old, started accounting business finance. That was what I wanted to do, I thought. And the money was there, the money was good. But then I remember it's my second year going in and I'm looking at the sidewalk. And, they have the crevices in the sidewalk, like from block to block. And I just saw it like it was almost like I was in a time machine.
It was like a blur.
It was like a blur. And I just remember asking myself, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And from there, I was like, no, I don't. I went in my day. And basically, from there, I was just like, new mindset teaching. And from there, I just and I rolled with the punches. But sometimes I like to ask myself a question. And the question is maybe not the best question because you have to look at your past. And the question is saying, if you can redo your life, would you do the same things over, the same things you did again? And I always like to give a caveat. You know everything that you know currently. Everything you know right now, you get to relive life. Maybe you're a baby, 4 years old, now you get to relive life. Some of the things I think about are like, of course, I'll buy like Apple stock and Microsoft, like the simple things, right?
The 2020 hindsight's always perfect, right?
Exactly. But then I start to ask myself some more serious questions. Would I stay in teaching? Would I even go in teaching knowing that I left teaching? Would I do something more fulfilling for a career initially, extremely fulfilled in my current career? Would I just jump and to do that versus go on my journey of going to different jobs? I mean, I already know it emotionally, but now on paper, I can't say I did those things. Or I'm just maybe an 18-year-old kid becoming a life coach and a mindset coach. Like, who is this guy? Like, they have no struggles, they have no challenges, they have all this stock in the right companies. They're living a good life. Their life is perfect. Who would come to me? I start to think the adversity, the challenges, the losses, and the failures, they help build me, they help create me. I want to ask you that question. What would you do if you got the chance to redo it all with the same mindset, the same memories, the same knowledge, and the wisdom you have currently?
Yeah, that's a great one. I've never thought of it like that, but I love the concept. With full knowledge, quite honestly, I would do a lot of the same stuff, quite honestly, Michael. Like I went to a very small college in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Gettysburg College. I would do that again. I grew up in a very small town. I love that small town environment. I would marry the same woman again if I could. For me, I think I would still do the work in accounting and finance that I did for so many years because I did find that very fulfilling, as we talked about fulfillment earlier. I think the only change I would see is I probably would have left the world of business earlier. I stayed in for 33 years and only 7 years in academia. And quite honestly, I wish that was more of a balance. I wish it was more like 25 years business, 15 years academia. So that'd be my one regret. I wouldn't change anything in the fact that I went from business to academia because I love that transition. And then transitioning from teaching to retirement was also a fairly easy transition for me. The only thing I would probably have done also, you mentioned this when you uprooted and went to Texas. I think I would have uprooted more. Like I've been in Pennsylvania majority of my life. I'm 64. I've been here all but those 7 years we were in Illinois. So I think I would have taken that opportunity, maybe seen some other parts of the country. That would have been a great kind of a do-over thing.
I am in the same boat as uplifting and moving from spot to spot. There's a joy that I get when it comes to starting fresh, building everything new. It's almost like we are building our dream house. Our dream house today is not going to be our dream house in 10 years because our situation changes. Maybe we have kids, maybe we have dogs and, family coming over. We have a big house. Now we're living in the mountains. We have great views. The kids are off to college. We don't need all the space. Now we don't need the big house anymore. A lot of people, what they do is they get their 30 years fixed for them. 30-year fixed mortgage, if you pick that up, right? They stay where they are. And that's a good portion of their life. Let's just say that's 1/3 of your life. You go live to 90, right? That's 1/3 of your life we're giving away to being static, to being habitual, to being in our comfort zone, to being immovable in a sense. But yet, I just got back from vacation, and there's people that would go to places for 2 months, 3 months, and they own a house too. They own the house and they just kind of leave for 2 months. They just say, you know what, I'm going to go to this place for 2 months to get away from the cold. Or I'm going to work remote. They learn how to work remote. They get jobs that they can work remote. And that's what they do. They have total freedom. Yet many people, we are slaves to our 9 to 5 job. We can't move. We can't work remote. We spend so much of our time, as you said, your 30 plus years, right? Just being there. Yet many people, they fall into that same trap, the same trap. I'm going to spend all my life to pay for a house, to work for a career I don't necessarily love, just to realize in 30 years that this is not happiness, that this is not fulfillment. What is that mindset? What can people do to change that? Can we be nomads? Can we say, okay, I'm going to only stay a year in each place? Like, what would be the fix to letting people live more freely instead of more stuck and locked in?
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? I mean, that's the hard thing to do, quite honestly, Mike, is change what's not working and try and do something different. Because I think we just get so locked into the day to day, as we talked about earlier. I think the challenge for each of us, each and every one of us, is to kind of sit down, maybe over a money date with your spouse or your significant other, and talk about how happy you are in each of your careers. And if you're not happy, as you said, there's a fair number of people I know who went their entire career and then looked back and said, I was miserable during most of my career, but it paid the bills, it paid for the house, paid the mortgage. And so I did what I had to do. Well, that's not exactly the best way to go through life, right? I mean, as you said, now that you're in your own business, you're much happier than you were in teaching and so forth. That's the challenge for each one of us and each one of your listeners, is to figure out what's not right in our lives. Don't just let it continue to occur day after day, but think about a game plan that you can talk to your spouse, your family, your other key members of your life, and figure out a game plan out of that. And if it means it's a career change, so be it. Because I think for me, the fact that there was people I know that thought that my wife and I were leaving, great job at Hershey, a great job in the medical profession, and we were going 700 miles away. They thought we were absolutely nuts. At age 54, for me, and my wife was 48, they thought that they'll be back in a year. Well, I think that's sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith. And we planned for that. So we had the financial resources to do it, but also we're pretty resilient people. And I think as you said earlier, you find out when you move to a new area, it's not that same route you used to take every day when you're living in Pennsylvania, but that's okay, because now you're finding out and discovering new things on your new path of your new drive to your work in Illinois. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed about moving to Illinois, is learning a new area, learning new friends, new places to go. We visit Chicago quite often, and St. Louis, some other cool sites in the Midwest. There's a lot out there in this world to enjoy, but sometimes we get so locked into our day to day, we don't even think about those enjoyment of other things that we can't see. That's the challenge for each one of us and each one of your listeners.
The world is bigger than what we think. A lot of people who are living in scarcity, they think there's not enough. It's because they're stuck where they are, and what they see around them is just walls. So they're like those birds in the cage that they say, okay, I can only fly this much. I can go to this side of the cage. I can go to this side of the cage. When in reality, the door is always open.
Right.
And you said some great things: resilience, change what's not working. And many people don't realize that the path that they're on might not be working the best for them. They just kind of move through, get a paycheck. I'm doing well, I'm doing better than others. We have to stop comparing ourselves to what other people are doing or what other people accomplished, and start to look at what we want. Just as you did when you moved away and all your friends said, you'll be back in a year. You did what you wanted, not what other people wanted, well, not what other people thought for you. You set the limits for yourself, and that's powerful. And the book that you wrote, Checkmate, is going to be opening so many doors for people to get new ideas, to get new inspiration, to finally maybe sum up the courage to finally leave that cage that they have been living in, that they can go after. They can look at the mistakes that they had made and they can say, those mistakes don't define me. I get to choose my future here on out. And that is so important. And our conversation was just that, right? Change what's not working, be resilient to go after what you love and what's going to fulfill you and make you happy. This is the premise of what life is. Yet many people, they run from it every single day. They choose comfort, they choose mediocrity, they choose the path of less fair, but it creates more hardship. And what you do is you help people get out of that way of living to challenge the status quo and to start to live the life that they were always destined to live. And I love to have guests on that do that, that help people find the joys of life instead of just, well, if you want to live a good retirement, work a 9 to 5 until you're 65, make sure you do your 401k match and you'll be okay. But that's not life. That's not living. And what you have done is you had the chance to live. All the answers you gave were a testament to that, that you can say, no matter what I did in my past, I am happy I did it. Versus some people will say, you know what, I would change everything. I would do this, I would do that. But the path that we're on helps us become the person that we are destined to become. Some paths are going to be very different. Some paths are going to be very windy. And some paths might be a straight shot to success. But regardless of your path, we have to go on that journey. And when you go on that journey, I always recommend don't go alone. Get yourself someone in your corner, whether it be a life coach, an author, a good book, a good read, and you find a mentor in that. And from there, you find your guide, you find your purpose. And the work that you do is helping people, as I said, do that. As we begin to wrap up, I would love to get some final words from you and then for you to tell the audience where they can find you.
This is a final wrap up. This was a great discussion, Michael. I really enjoyed talking about these topics with you and having your audience hear some of these great concepts. I think the overall takeaway for me is Checkmate is probably the epitome of what I learned over 60 some years. And I think it's important that people understand that, the tips I offer in Checkmate they've never heard of them before, or there's certainly something that we've all have done at one point in our lives. But I think the tips are rather simple, but they do make you kind of reassess what you're doing with your life and where you want to change it. As far as where people can find me, I just actually unveiled a new website today, because today is actually the 2-year anniversary of when I started the work on the book. It was on February 2nd, 2022, which for us number freaks is 2222. Today, I unveiled my website. That's www.davischeckmate.com. I'd encourage your listeners to check that out. I offer a whole bevy of services there with signed books that I ship out, as well as some other services for speaking engagements, whether they can be remote or live. And I just think the overall premise of what we talked about today is every one of us in our lives today probably has something they want to change. The key is just to be able to do something about it. And that's not easy to do. And I talk about lots of perseverance issues in chapter 3 in my book. A quick example would be Milton Hershey, who developed the town of Hershey. He went bankrupt 3 times in his life before he actually developed the success for developing chocolate. The key takeaway from my book, Checkmate, is pick up a couple of tips from that book, apply them to your own life, and I think you'll be on a different plane to where I hope you're much happier. And as we say, the analogy, you achieve that checkmate in your life.
And they say hindsight is 2020, where we can look at all of our mistakes, we can look at all of our shortcomings. But I always say there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Wisdom is going through it, doing it, living it. In the book, Checkmate, right? The 62 years of experience right there is wisdom. Of course, it's good to be sprinkled in with a bunch of knowledge, but wisdom is going to help so many people get further ahead versus the trial and error, which many people love to go for. I don't know why they do it. Trial and error versus wisdom. I always choose wisdom. It's going to get you to where you need to be a lot quicker, a lot more unscathed, less trauma, everything, all those negative things, you're going to avoid them. Some is good, but not everything that you have to go through is necessary. All those links for your website, your book is going to be in the description box below. I encourage everyone to get a copy of his book, an easy read, 150 pages about, and you're going to gain so much wisdom to help you change what's not working in your life. I want to thank you so much, Greg Davis, for coming on, talking about your work, and spending a little bit of time with us. All right, everyone, I'd like to thank you so much for watching that interview with Greg Davis and myself. As you can see, a lot of interesting questions today. I was going crazy with the questions because when you have someone as seasoned as Greg, it's always important to ask those questions. Because if you have someone who has lived life, guess what? You want to know if the path that you're on or the path that someone could be going on is going to be the right path. Because he has already gone through the flow chart and he's going to be well ahead of many people. So if you're 40 years old, he has 20 plus years on you already. This right here is going to be your 20-year plan. Because now we can say, okay, this person did this, this was his outcome. It might be the same, but it might not also be the same, right? Everyone has a different journey. Everyone has a different mindset. Everyone has different desires, wants for themselves. If I love ice cream, right? I love vanilla ice cream. This is just an example. It doesn't mean you're going to love vanilla ice cream. So I'm not going to say, well, when you're 21, make sure you get vanilla ice cream because it's going to be so great. But there's other people who like chocolate chip ice cream. Okay, cool. Which one is the best? We can debate which one is the best, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to opinion. You get to choose what you want for your life. You get to choose how you get to live. You get to choose who you want to be. But yet many people, they fall into a person that they were told to become. The school systems, the parents, teachers, they often will give you limits. You can be this, you can't be that. Versus you can be anything that you want to be. We all have an inkling of what we want for ourselves, what makes us happy, our passions, our desires. Sometimes our passions can be a little bit wonky because our passions can be something that are wishy-washy because today you might love dirt bikes, tomorrow you might love chess. Today you might love doing sewing and tomorrow you might want to start a rock and roll band. Where is our passion? Our passion is jumping from extreme to extreme. Do we follow our passions? Is our passions going to lead us on the right path? And often, our passions will give us some direction. They will say, okay, this is what we need. This is what we have to do for the moment. That's going to bring us happiness. It's going to bring us fulfillment. Now, will your passions change? It's very possible that your passions could change. For me, passion of mine was music. I love music. I have guitars, multiple instruments, know how to play them. But yet, passion, do I find passion when I play them? Do I find passion? Do I find more passion playing an instrument or spending time with my family? I find more passion spending time with my family. So was the passion of me learning how to play an instrument necessary? I believe so. Because we learn something about ourselves. They say that it's better to love than have lost than to never have loved at all. When it comes to passion, you don't necessarily know the difference between what you have loved and what you are loving. Because now you have a thing to compare it with. You might say, I really enjoy doing carpentry. And I enjoy carpentry more than I did playing guitar, right? This is just an example. And similar to how I had multiple careers, Greg had multiple careers, he can say either or. I love my corporate job. It was great. But now what I'm doing today is more fulfilling. It brings me more happiness and more joy. We have that ability to compare. And if you don't have the ability to compare, then this is where we have the issues in life. Many people don't realize, oh, I'm trying to figure out what I need to do, which path I need to go on. And this is where people struggle. Many people are trying to find their way in life, yet they're unwilling to give themselves something to compare it with. That means they're stuck in their same town. They're stuck in their same job. They're stuck in their same mindset. And what I bring to the world and what I bring here in coaching and session is an opportunity to have you challenge who you are. Sometimes you're going to find out that maybe who you are is who you want to be. Maybe you're going to realize that the journey from where you are to where you need to be is too long and too arduous. So you don't want to take the path. Some people take that path. They say it's too much work. And then there's going to be the people who say, I'm not satisfied where I am. I want to try to get to where I think I want to be. I don't care what it takes to get there. So it just depends on your current mindset, your current level of aspirations. Change what's not working, right? To be resilient. Many people are not going to be that. Many people are going to do what they have been told. They're going to buy a house next to their parents, and they're going to stay there for the rest of their life. Versus to go out and to explore, to go out and to go live life. The world is big, yet many people that live small. So if you want to elevate your mindset, if you want to create that big mindset for yourself, reach out to Greg, reach out to us here at Reven Concepts. We'll be more than happy to help you along those journeys that you're going to be going on in life, because life is always going to have twists and turns. Sometimes it's going to lead us to the best views, and sometimes it's going to lead us to dead ends. We can't be afraid of those dead ends in life. Those are lessons in themselves. Those are opportunities to say, I learned. And from there we grow. From there we know. And from there we get to make the changes that we need. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, email me coachinginsession@gmail.com. And I'll see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone, take care.